Michael Liberatore. I'm a faculty member in the Theology Department at the Ateneo, and also a member of the Christian Life Community in the Philippines, which is a lay discerning Ignatian apostolic community. And so I'd just like to share a few things that have informed our way of life and our way of proceeding, and that I think might be helpful in trying to understand what the synodal process is and how it may help in terms of participating in the NCRE as we listen, as we accompany and we empower young people. And so that's why when we talk about spiritual consolation and spiritual desolation, it's important that we recognize the presence of the question of the movement that's coming with it. Not just what am I feeling, but what's happening underneath, what's driving it and what's pushing it. And I think this will be an important part as we go through the NCRE, is to constantly be aware of from what direction and in what direction am I being moved. Is it towards greater self, inward, towards greater self-righteousness, greater being convinced that I'm correct, I'm the right, I have all the answers? Or is it a movement towards patience, freedom, generosity, openness, and a willingness to allow myself to be unsettled, because maybe that's something the Spirit wants to teach me? And so one of the ways we move through this is in this process of what we might call spiritual conversation. Again, in the Vadimecum, this is one of the recommended processes to be used for the Synod, and one I think that can help us in this process of going through this NCRE. It begins with the sacred listening, it then proceeds to spiritual conversation, and then a mini-discernment. But all of this being surrounded by contemplative silence, pausing, allowing ourselves to hold on to what we're feeling and what's moving within us, and creating space for the Spirit to instruct us and to guide us. The first step in this is really sacred listening. Really focus on response to the prayer or the question, in which we listen intently. Each of the speakers will come, of course, and have a topic that they're speaking on, have some questions they've been asked. And the first part is really just listening intently, both to what is shared and how we feel our attention being directed, what we feel it's being directed toward, what we're being drawn to. And I think this is important because very often, we'll be bothered by certain things. In the comments, questions, we'll say, well, were they really catechized? Did they really learn what they were supposed to? Did they really pay attention in their religious education classes? And all of a sudden, we want to defend the fact that, well, it's not religious education or the process that it happens. It's not how we catechize young people. It's not the evangelization process that's problematic. It's the people that went through it that are the problem. And yet, is this being unsettled really just about judging the people that are sharing, or the research that they reveal and present? Or is it an invitation for us to ask ourselves more deeply, how has our evangelization process worked? How have we done catechesis? Is there a need to evolve it? And this, I think, is how the Spirit begins sometimes to use the fact that we are humiliated. Over the Advent season, the Pope was speaking to the Jesuits in Greece upon his visit to Greece. And one of the things that he was saying was, maybe we need to look at the situation we find ourselves in, especially, for example, when it comes to Jesuit vocations, and to ask if the Lord is putting us through a period of humiliation where we do not have many vocations, and to allow that humiliation to open us up to where the Lord wants to lead us. Not simply to solve the problem, but to allow the Spirit to speak to us. And really, this is the first one, is to say that, you know what, I'm unsettled, I'm uncomfortable. Well, when we note those ulterior movements, we say, this is what's moving within me as I listen to this person speaking, as I pause at the end of this and allow those interior movements to settle, to bubble up, to become clear to me so that I can name them, so that I can identify them. From there, then, we move to spiritual conversation and dialogue, being able to truly speak to one another, speaking about some of the graces I received while listening, or the inner movements that I had as others were sharing, as the speaker was speaking, as other people were asking their questions. As I paused after the session, how was I moved? Are there depth questions that I'd like to ask, that I feel moved to offer? Is there an invitation or desire that I feel moving within me? And how am I experiencing the Spirit speaking to all, to me, through this conversation? I think the key point here is the dialogue is not about convincing others. It's not about arguing. It's not about making people see things as I see them. But rather, the conversation is about asking how the Spirit is working through us, with us, and in us, in helping to direct and to guide us. And once we have that, as we pause after the second round of conversation, as we pause after the spiritual conversation, we then can move to spiritual discernment, mini-discernment as it might be called. What are the movements of the good Spirit? What are the consolations I've received in this session? What seems to be resonating maybe with the group that gives us insight into what it might be saying to us going forward? Are there no insights or unresolved questions that have to be continued to be explored? And that maybe we want to end with spontaneous prayers of gratitude, spontaneous prayers of appreciation of what's been happened, what's been shared, what's been received, and how we're being moved in this. And so those three levels, those three steps in the spiritual conversation process of sacred listening, spiritual conversation, and then mini discernment are, I think, important three steps as we go through this process of listening. But to be able to be present to the youth, to be able to be present to young people, means that we must honor their experiences, recognize the holiness of what they're sharing, and the risk that they're taking in putting themselves before us. And to honor that by recognizing that maybe the Spirit wants to say something to us that doesn't require us to react, but rather allows us to think about how we're being moved to go forward from here. And that in that we're being moved by the good Spirit to spiritual consolation, with greater generosity and magnanimity, for which we can give gratitude of what we've received and what we've heard. And this is just a brief welcome, a brief introduction that hopefully will guide us as we enter into the 14th National Conference for Religious Educators, as we enter into this holding hands while walking with the youth in order to listen, accompany, and empower. And that the insights from the synodal process may be relevant for us as we participate in this. And hopefully these brief words have helped us to begin to prepare and open ourselves up for the NCRE. And so thank you very much, and I wish you the best in the NCRE.